You won't believe what happened to my wife and me last week. Something straight out of a bad TV show. Picture this. We're just trying to live peacefully in our neighborhood when suddenly, some guys show up at our door dressed like cops. But here's the catch. They're not real police. Nope, they're part of our HOA's so-called security team, acting like they have authority to arrest people. And guess who they decided to target? My wife. Things quickly went from strange to downright shocking when they tried to detain her right there in our own home. What they didn't know, though, is that my wife isn't just anyone. She's a federal prosecutor. That fact changes everything. This story is one of those wild moments that you almost can't believe happened in real life. We've all heard the rumors about overzealous HOAs, but this crossed a line that nobody expects. What started as a quiet evening turned into a battle over who really has the power. And what happens when those lines get blurred? It's not just about fake cops or overbearing neighbors. It's about standing up for what's right when people misuse authority. The tension was real, and the stakes felt higher than ever. I'm going to take you through every intense moment, how it all unfolded, the confrontation, and the shock on everyone's faces when my wife revealed who she really is. But trust me, this isn't just a simple story about fake authority. It's a glimpse into how people in power can sometimes push too far and what happens when you fight back with the truth on your side. Stay tuned because the story doesn't end here. What happened next will surprise you and maybe even make you question the rules we live by. You're about to hear the full tale of how HOA fake cops tried to arrest my wife and why they had no idea who they were dealing with. To understand how we got to that crazy moment, you need to know a little bit about our neighborhood and the HOA that runs it. Our community has always been pretty quiet, with rules that most people follow without much fuss. But over the past year, things started changing. The HOA board became more strict, and their so-called security team started acting like they had more power than they actually do. They're not police, but they began showing up unannounced, questioning neighbors, and even threatening fines or punishments for the smallest things. It felt like they were overstepping their boundaries, but we never thought it would get this intense. My wife has always been someone who believes in justice and the law. She's a federal prosecutor, which means she spends her days making sure people who break the law get held accountable. So when those HOA fake cops showed up at our door trying to arrest her for something petty and unclear, it was shocking. They claimed she violated a community rule and insisted she had to come with them. We were confused. How could they think they had that kind of authority? And why target her? It felt personal, like they wanted to intimidate us. What made the situation even more tense was how calm and collected my wife stayed. Instead of panicking, she asked them to identify themselves and explain their authority. That's when things got awkward. They hesitated, their confident act starting to crack. But still, they pushed forward, trying to convince her they had the right to detain her. Meanwhile, I was standing there, watching the whole thing unfold, feeling a mix of disbelief and anger. It wasn't just about a misunderstanding anymore. It was about power and control, and we were caught right in the middle. There's a lot more to this story. The warnings we'd ignored, the strange behaviors from the HOA, and what finally made us realize this wasn't just about rules but something deeper. But before I get into all that, you've got to hear about what happened when my wife dropped the bombshell about her job. That moment changed everything. Stay with me, because the truth behind this HOA drama is about to get even more unbelievable. When my wife finally told them she was a federal prosecutor, the whole dynamic shifted instantly. You could see the surprise, and maybe even a little fear, in their eyes. Suddenly, these guys who'd been so bold and pushy just minutes before started acting unsure of themselves. But instead of backing off completely, they doubled down in a way that made everything feel even more tense. It was like they wanted to prove they still had some kind of control, even though they clearly didn't. That's when I realized this wasn't just about enforcing HOA rules anymore. It was about intimidation and trying to flex fake power over people they didn't fully understand. There's more to this HOA than meets the eye. Behind the polite newsletters and monthly meetings, there's a growing faction within the board that seems obsessed with control. We'd heard whispers from neighbors about other strange encounters, people being grilled about their guests, letters threatening fines over tiny things like flower colors or lawn ornaments. Some neighbors had even started pushing back, but it felt risky. The board's security team wasn't official police, but they acted like it, and the board seemed willing to support them no matter what. On top of that, there's a strange history with this security team. They're privately hired, with no real training or authority, yet they roam the neighborhood like they own the place. A few residents had reported them using intimidating tactics, and some even suspected they had a personal grudge against certain homeowners, including us. The tension in the neighborhood was rising, and people were starting to question whether this HOA had crossed a line into harassment. Meanwhile, my wife and I were left trying to figure out what to do next. Should we fight back legally? Could we even trust the HOA board to handle this fairly? Or would pushing back just make things worse? The whole situation was like a powder keg ready to explode, and every interaction with the HOA seemed to ratchet up the stress. And with my wife's job as a federal prosecutor, it felt like the stakes were higher than ever, not just for us, but for the whole community. But just when we thought it couldn't get any more complicated, something else happened, something that made us realize this was far from over. I'm about to tell you what came next, and trust me, it will blow your mind. After that intense confrontation, things didn't calm down. In fact, they only got worse. The HOA board didn't just drop it after my wife revealed her role as a federal prosecutor. Instead, they seemed to double down, sending more notices and increasing their patrols around our house. It felt like we were under constant watch, and every little thing we did was being scrutinized. Even simple trips outside felt tense, because you never knew if one of those fake cops might show up again, ready to stir up trouble. The neighborhood, which used to feel like a safe place, suddenly felt hostile and unpredictable. Neighbors started coming to us with their own stories, instances where the HOA security had acted suspiciously or overstepped boundaries. Some told us about their doors being knocked on late at night, others about being threatened with fines for trivial violations. It was clear this wasn't an isolated issue. Something was seriously wrong with the way this HOA operated. But nobody wanted to speak up too loudly because they feared retaliation. The power dynamics were skewed, and the fake authority these security officers claimed gave them a dangerous edge. Meanwhile, my wife was carefully weighing our options. As a federal prosecutor, she knew how to handle legal battles. But this felt different, more personal. This wasn't a court case. It was a neighborhood war where the lines between right and wrong were blurred by politics, fear, and intimidation. She started digging into the HOA's background, trying to find out if there were any violations in how they hired or empowered this security team. What she found raised even more questions about their legitimacy and motives. Then came the night that changed everything, the night they showed up again, this time with a crowd of people, more aggressive and less willing to listen. The tension was at its peak, and the air felt thick with the threat of confrontation. We knew this was the moment where everything could explode or finally come to a head. Every neighbor seemed to be holding their breath, watching to see what would happen next. I won't lie, it was scary. But what happened during that confrontation is something you have to hear to believe. The stakes were higher than ever, and the fake cops didn't know what they were about to walk into. Just when we thought things couldn't get any more intense, something happened that completely flipped the script. During that heated confrontation with the HOA's fake security team, as tensions were at their highest, one of the officers suddenly pulled out a badge, a real-looking badge, and claimed to be a retired law enforcement officer. That was the moment everything got way more complicated. Up until then, we assumed they were just neighborhood bullies in poorly made costumes, but this badge suggested something else. Suddenly, their whole story didn't add up. Were they actually connected to law enforcement in some way? Or was this just another part of their act to scare people? This revelation sent my wife into high alert. If even one of these guys had real police training or a background in law enforcement, it changed the whole game. It raised questions about how far the HOA was willing to go to control the neighborhood, and whether there were even more serious risks we hadn't realized. The fake cops weren't just bluffing anymore. They might actually know how to push legal boundaries to intimidate us. But here's the kicker. Right after that, another neighbor stepped forward with something shocking. They had footage from a security camera showing the HOA board meeting in secret with this security team. The board was discussing plans to escalate their control over the community, including tactics that sounded borderline illegal. This wasn't just about petty fines or neighborhood rules anymore. It was about power plays, manipulation, and possibly even corruption. The whole neighborhood was on edge. People were scared, but they also wanted answers. My wife knew that if we didn't act, this situation could spiral out of control fast. The fake cops weren't just a nuisance, they were a threat. And with those new pieces of information, it was clear this was far bigger than just a simple HOA dispute. We were caught in the middle of something much darker, and the pressure was mounting. The question was, how far would they go, and what were we willing to do to stop them? The story was about to reach a boiling point, and the next moves would change everything. The night everything came to a head was like nothing we'd ever experienced. The HOA's fake security team showed up again, but this time, they were more aggressive than before, expecting us to back down. Instead, my wife stood her ground, calmly but firmly laying out the facts, her position as a federal prosecutor, the lack of any real legal authority they had, and the evidence we had gathered about their shady meetings with the HOA board. The crowd of neighbors had gathered quietly behind us, watching as the tension thickened in the air. Suddenly, the man with the retired officer badge tried to assert control, but my wife called his bluff. She requested to see official identification and proof of any current authority, things he couldn't provide. As the neighbors watched, it became clear that the fake cops had no real power. Then, one of the neighbors stepped forward with the security footage, exposing the secret meeting between the HOA board and the security team. The footage showed them discussing plans to intimidate residents and enforce rules beyond their legal rights. That was the moment the whole facade started to crumble. Faced with undeniable evidence and a united neighborhood, the fake security team backed down. The HOA board couldn't deny the footage, and the threats stopped almost immediately. We reported everything to the local authorities, who began investigating the HOA's actions. The community finally began to breathe again, feeling safer knowing that these fake cops no longer had a hold over us. But just when we thought the nightmare was over, an unexpected twist surfaced. During the investigation, it was revealed that one of the HOA board members had been secretly recording many of the neighborhood's residents and using that information to manipulate votes and decisions. It wasn't just about fake cops anymore. It was a tangled web of control, surveillance, and betrayal right under our noses. Our story became more than just a battle against fake authority. It was a fight for truth and freedom in a place that was supposed to be our home. And even though the worst of it was behind us, we knew one thing for sure: this neighborhood would never be the same again. After everything came to light, our neighborhood slowly started to heal. The HOA board members involved in the secret recordings and manipulation were removed, and local authorities stepped in to oversee the community's governance for a while. It was clear that the power struggles and fake authority had caused real damage, not just to us but to many neighbors who felt afraid or powerless for too long. What started as a simple dispute over HOA rules turned into a much bigger lesson about standing up to intimidation and knowing your rights. My wife's role as a federal prosecutor played a huge part in how this all unfolded. Her calm but firm approach helped expose the truth without escalating violence or chaos. We learned that sometimes the best way to deal with fake authority is not with anger, but with clear facts and legal knowledge. It was inspiring to see how our neighbors came together once they realized they weren't alone. that community strength could push back against unfair treatment. Looking back, this experience changed how we see our home and the importance of fair governance. HOAs can be helpful when they work properly, but when they overreach and try to act like law enforcement without any real power,